Hey guys, Brigitte with San Diego Seed Company, and today we're going to be talking about planting your very first fruit tree. How do you do it? Where do you plant it? How big is the hole? Where do you get the fruit tree? How do you choose the type? All the things that you need to know, all the things that I've learned over the years, and I've got some serious expert help here with my buddy Craig, and we're going to jump into all those details. But before you do that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're notified anytime we put out a video. So this video is really for like brand new, maybe homeowners or gardeners, and they want to plant their first fruit tree. Let's kind of walk through the steps of that. First of all, you know, where do you buy your fruit tree? What do you look for? So, you know, what's the difference between like bare root fruit trees and regular fruit trees? When you go get a fruit tree for a client, what are you looking for?
First thing I'm looking for is I got to make sure I have a place to put it.
Oh,
so
true.
Before we even get into purchasing fruit trees or planting fruit trees, because planting is actually the last thing we're going to do, we need to make sure we have a place to put it and that we're set up for success. One of the biggest mistakes I see—
Said like an expert.
One of the biggest mistakes I see is people buying trees, putting them in the ground, and then trying to figure out irrigation.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That doesn't work because there's a pretty good chance that your soil is nowhere near ready to accept a tree.
And we're really talking about Southern California, where you have to have irrigation if you want your trees to be super happy.
100%.
We don't get enough rainfall.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Absolutely. So here we are already set up. We have 2 rings of irrigation, which is important. Just having one little one right around the trunk is going to work for about a year, and after that you're not getting water to the parts of the roots that need it.
Okay.
So being set up, we're already set up for a couple years worth of growth, maybe more than that. As the tree gets bigger, we'll have to expand out, but for now we're good. We've got a hole dug, which means we've taken time to figure out where our spacing, where our tree is going to go in our yard, where it's going to do best, and we've taken things into consideration like hours of sunlight, proximity to other trees. How is this tree going to grow that we're going to put here versus the trees that are growing next to it? Does this tree like to grow vertically? Is it going to get wide? So we have to just take into account—
Is it going to shade my veggie garden?
Exactly.
All those things. Okay.
All of those things. We need to spend some time thinking ahead. You will hear any horticultural expert tell you always start with a plan. Okay. So we have our plan. When it comes to actually purchasing the fruit trees, we have a bunch of wonderful nurseries in San Diego that carry a great deal of trees.
We're so lucky.
We are lucky. But we want to look for the best tree. Not all trees are created equal. Trees are individuals. Some trees have been taken care of better than others. You got to remember, but by the time these trees have gotten to the nursery, they've had quite a journey. They've spent, you know, up to 3 years, maybe more at a growing nursery. Then we're shipped in a truck, moved several times, branches get broken, things happen. So we want to pick out the tree that looks best for us. That also means you're also going to be picking the best tree that they have available, which, depending on how quickly you got there—
Yeah, it depends on the season, things like that. Now, what about bare root versus just a potted plant? And can you explain to the viewers what bare root means?
Yes. So for dormant trees that go dormant in the wintertime, our stone fruits, our apples, our apriums, our pomegranates, anything that loses its leaves in the winter, we can buy as a bare root in the winter. So basically what a bare root tree is it's a tree that was grown in a pot at a grower up to a certain size, usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 years old. And then the roots have been, when it was dormant, have been pulled and trimmed. This is actually my favorite way to plant a tree if I can, because this allows my tree to create a completely new root system in its native soil where it's going to live. And
it's also one of the least expensive ways to buy trees.
Correct. You were talking about the difference of maybe more than $100 if we're talking about a 15-gallon tree versus a bare root tree.
Yep.
That is the best way to plant a tree if you can.
And bare root season for Southern California is they're available probably beginning of the year, and then there's a short window. They're really only available until the nursery sells out of them.
Correct.
Because they buy them, and you're talking about a live product.
Correct.
That you need to get back into the ground ASAP.
And here in Southern California, we know that spring's going to come faster here.
Yep.
We just know it. We know our window's shorter, so it's usually end of December until about mid to end February, depending on what the weather does that year.
Okay.
What we don't want is we don't want these bare root trees starting to flower at the nursery, because then we're causing stress when we go to plant.
Okay. So you go to the nursery, hopefully a local independent nursery.
Correct.
You get your bare root fruit tree. You get one that, you know, just use the eye test. You don't have to be a genius, right? No broken branches. It's not like falling over to one side. It should look good because you're also going to prune it to the size and the shape that you need. But it just, you know, basic common sense when you buy that bare root fruit tree is going to go a long way.
Yep, and so just keep in mind that we're only buying bare roots if the tree is available to be sold in bare root. Not all trees are.
So you're not going to get bare root citrus?
No, anything that's an evergreen, you're not going to get a bare root. You're going to be buying it in a pot. So as you mentioned, you were looking for some basic things, but even if you don't know what to look for, the people that work at the nurseries do.
Yes.
So you can rely on the people that are working at the nursery to help you pick a good tree that they know is going to have good shape, doesn't have too many broken branches, doesn't have any bug issues. Something we want to look for. We don't ever want it to happen, but occasionally, the bugs come in. And so we want to be looking at the leaves.
And you don't want fruit on the tree, right?
Correct.
You want it to be a baby that hasn't been in that pot for so long that it's already fruiting.
Yep, correct. Trees are an exercise in patience. Everybody wants their fruit right now. And I understand.
You want it last year.
Yeah, you want it last year. Everybody wants a tree that's already giving fruit. And citrus will. But really, we want the first 2 years of that tree to spend all of its time rooting out and establishing a really nice, solid foundation. Because without a good foundation, we're not going to have as healthy of a tree.
Okay.
So I actually will remove all fruit that the tree tries to create in the first couple of years, and just know that I'm actually going to get more fruit, and we're going to make up for that down the road, but we're talking years down the road.
Patience is a virtue when it comes to your fruit tree. So you're purchasing a fruit tree that doesn't currently have fruit on it. If it does, you're going to remove that first season because it's going to impede on the root growth, which is what we need. Now we have a tree that we bought here. This is a avocado tree, and we've already actually pre-dug the hole. Can you tell me about this hole? Why is it this size? It kind of, it doesn't seem very big to me. What's the thought process here?
Well, there's a lot of, if you go on to the internet, you're going to find a lot of advice. The most current science says that what we need is a hole just slightly bigger than the root ball of the tree that we're planting. And we don't want it too deep. We want to make sure that we're planting our trees deep enough that they have a shallow well, because we do want water to collect around the tree, but we don't want this tree sinking so far that we're going to end up rotting the part of the trunk that's above the soil level. So in this case, we've dug it. It looks like it may be a little bit too deep, so we're just going to do a little test just to see where we're at. A little too deep. If you look, you can see that we're a good 4 to 5 inches below the level of the soil.
And when we plant this and water it, naturally it's going to sink a few more inches, right?
Correct, because all of our soil is still very loose.
Yep.
So I'm just going to lay this down so that we don't mess with the roots
So we can put a little bit more in here. And I want you guys to realize this is some really good looking soil. Yeah. And if you go into your backyard and start digging in your backyard in Southern California, you're not likely to find this unless, you just got really lucky. This has been amended with compost. So we've actually used compost from our homemade composter right there. And, a couple weeks prior to planting, we amended this area with compost to make it easier to dig the hole. Now, do you recommend doing that process?
I definitely recommend digging the hole a few days ahead of time and filling that hole with water. Now, as she mentioned, this is really, really good soil. This is about as good as it gets. Most of you are not going to have this quality of soil when you dig a hole. What you're probably going to have is some very hard clay. And that's what we have in Southern California. That's what we're made of here. So what we're going to need to do is start soaking that. Clay does not want to accept water really fast, but once it does, it holds it really well. So we're actually going to dig our hole and we're going to fill it with water, and we're just going to let it sit. And we're going to let that water slowly soak. We might even do that 2 or 3 times just to make sure that we have enough water around the hole. Otherwise, we run into the problem of putting down water and having the dry soil around it just wicking that water away, and we're not keeping the water around our root ball. So you can see this is all very nice and damp.
Yep.
As you mentioned, it's already really well amended with good compost. We have good loamy soil, so we have good conditions there. We will still add some more compost just in and around the tree once we plant it. But for most people out there, you're not going to have this soil. You're going to need a good amount of compost, and you're going to need it regularly.
Okay. So we've dug our hole. Soil looks good. We've got this fruit tree.
Let's see where we land here.
We want to be, level with the ground, knowing that it's going to drop maybe an inch or two.
Yeah, and I would actually bring this up just a little bit more because we just put a bunch of very loose soil at the bottom. And so we know that's going to compact down by half. That's probably good. All right.
The soil's good when you don't need any tools and you can just use your hands. Yeah. That's the
truth. So at this point, this is the only amendment that I will do to a soil. We're not going to be adding any fertilizer. We are not going to be adding any sort of other product to this until well down the road in its life.
Okay.
Right now, we need the tree to acclimate to its natural living space, its natural soil. So what we're going to do is we're going to go grab a little bit of that compost. And we're just going to sprinkle this, some in and some around. And all we're doing is adding some organic matter into the soil that's just going to give this tree a little bit more nutrients as this breaks down and it grows. And then we just backfill it in.
And now, question for viewers at home, they might be thinking, wait, do we break up any roots at the bottom? Do we do anything? Like, what should it look like? Oh, wow, that's a heavy tree, can't even barely lift it. If it was really root bound, what's the take on that?
The take is the smaller the tree is better.
Okay.
So the bottom line is the longer that a tree is in a pot, the more it's becoming root bound. So a 5-gallon tree is about a 2-year-old tree. So it's been in a pot for 2 years. A 15-gallon tree is 3 years old.
Yeah.
Or supposed to be. So what's happened in 3 years is that you've got a massive roots. Now with avocado trees in particular, they do not like their roots messed with. So I just prefer to go with a much smaller tree that has not nearly as much roots that we can just pop right in the ground.
Okay.
With a more hardy tree or with dormant trees, we can definitely go in and clean out the soil, loosen the roots up, open them up so that they have a little bit more room. The more root bound it is, the more important it would be to do that, which to me means more reason to just avoid it altogether.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So in this case, this is a young tree. This would be less than 2 years old. And you can see that the tree, you can see down here that the roots have started to wrap, but they're not super dense.
Okay.
We can put our fingers in here quite easy.
Pretty loose.
And like I said, the avocados in particular, the more you mess with the roots, the less happy they're gonna be. They're really finicky trees. Okay. So we wanna mess with them as little as possible. So we're just gonna go ahead and backfill this now. And as we go, we're just gonna kind of lightly push to try and start compacting that soil underneath. And then making sure that we're compacting this as we go. Not too hard. We definitely don't want to stick our foot in there and stand on it because we could damage the roots, but we want to start pushing it down to make sure that we don't leave too much air. Otherwise, what we're going to end up with is this sitting up above this soil here, and we're going to start having exposed roots.
Okay. So while he's filling this back in, I just want to point out to the viewers, you see this little browning on the leaves. This is super common, and that's probably saltburn. So avocados, also mangoes, are very susceptible to saltburn, which is naturally occurs in our city water. And so in our orchard, we actually use a lot of our saved rainwater specifically for our avocados. It makes a really big difference, much greener, happier growth. This is not dire. You can see all the new growth that it is flushing out is a lot prettier. And as we use more rainwater on this tree, these leaves will fall off, they'll look a lot better, which is a nice little segue into just a little thing that I learned. I went to a professional avocado grove and noticed that they don't rake up any of their avocado leaves. And when he did pull them back, it was really amazing to see the roots were like right there. So avocado roots are very shallow, and we got to keep them cool in Southern California. So that means leaving the leaves on the ground when they fall, not raking them up and making it too pretty, and also mulch. On our farm, mulch is key.
Correct.
And so we mulch very heavily, but not too close to the trunk. Is that all spot on?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to touch on the leaves here, that the reason why this is happening is that avocado trees actually cannot process salt.
Okay.
They're one of the few trees that don't have a way to actually use it.
Okay.
Or in the quantities that we have it. So what this is actually the salt collecting in the leaf, and then eventually this tree is going to drop a bunch of leaves all at once, and that is the tree shedding itself of salt.
Okay.
So this is like a storage unit. And then as long as you see, as you mentioned, as long as you see new growth, we're in good shape.
Okay.
If you stop seeing new growth, you might have a problem with your
And
tree.
salt is a very heavy mineral, so when you use rainwater, you can actually flush and push the salt deeper down into the ground away from the fruit tree. So I know, like, when we first started growing our avocado trees, after we killed like 4 or 5 of them, we finally got it right, we realized that we really need to prioritize our rainwater on our avocados and our mangoes.
Correct.
And now we get tons every year, and it's so much happier. For the viewers at home, is there any last little tips that you would have for someone who's planting their first fruit tree?
Yes, especially if you're planting citrus or avocados, we need to shade them because citrus and avocados are susceptible to sunburn. The reason why they grow bushy and shaggy and have that kind of dense foliage is actually to protect the trunk from the sun. As you can see here, this is just a little tree and it's lost a lot of leaves, so a lot of the branches are exposed. If we don't do something about this right now, our tree is never going to get the chance to actually grow into a large tree. So we have a couple options. We can either whitewash it, which is a mixture of latex white paint or whatever color you prefer mixed with water, which is essentially sunscreen for your tree. The other thing we can do is we can actually build a shade structure.
Yeah.
So we can actually just put some lodge poles in with some shade cloth. I would say like a 50 or 60% shade cloth, maybe 40 is probably even okay. Yep. Just to make sure that during the brunt of the heat that this tree is protected. I like to paint because I like the tree to get as much sun as possible. It just spurs growth faster.
It's very easy. When you paint, you can be a little, you know, we just do it very quickly. It's just getting it on the branches, on the trunk, on exposed areas. You don't put them on the leaves, obviously, because those leaves need to collect sunlight for, you know, photosynthesizing. But it is the trunk and the branches of the trees that really are susceptible to our hard, harsh sun.
And you'll see that the branches will start to turn black.
Yep.
And that's how you know you're starting to get sun
Getting
damage.
burned.
And a tree this small, it doesn't take much.
Okay.
So the last thing is the nursery stakes. This is this is a pet peeve of mine. Because this nursery stake is not meant to live here forever. This nursery stake was meant to keep it looking good while it was at the nursery. And at this point, it needs to come off. But before we take it off, we need to have new stakes. The best way to hold, especially an avocado tree, which can be kind of floppy, we want to make sure that we keep this guy growing in the direction that we want. So we're actually going to put 3 lodge poles in a triangle. And then we're going to put a strap to each one, about a foot to 18 inches away. And we're going to put a strap so that it's held at 3 points.
Okay.
Now we're not going to use rope. We're going to use either a rubber strap or we're going to use something to protect the trunk from rope burn, because in the wind it's going to move.
Okay.
But what we don't want is this rubbing up against this tree and starting to get cut off and collared as the tree grows, and this is still attached.
And
to
now
it.
those the 3 poles that you have with the ropes coming, or you know, the support coming across, that's really just to keep it upright as crutches, because eventually it's going to get to a point where it can hold itself up.
Yeah, and we actually don't want to stake it too much. We don't want to give it too much support. We actually want the tree to be able to move around, because that's actually
exercise.
Exactly. It's just like going to the gym.
Yep.
So the more it can move around without falling over, the better. But we also keep in mind that we don't want anything too tough rubbing up against that tree, so we want to make sure we use, you know, a piece of carpet.
I've seen a lot of people use a cutting of an old hose.
Yeah, that
goes
works
around the string
works
perfectly.
perfect, yeah.
Or the rope. So just Cliff Note version of this video, we talked about how to plant, what size hole you're going to use, the irrigation that you're going to use, how you're going to amend that hole, and then how you're going to keep that plant upright. Planting a fruit tree is one of the most amazing experiences that you could do, and the best time to plant a fruit tree was a year ago. So if you haven't planted any this year, please go out, get some fruit trees, put them in your yard. It doesn't even matter if you don't even think you're going to be in that property a year from now. You're leaving a mark, an edible, delicious mark on that property for somebody else to enjoy. So
you're also increasing the canopy.
Yep.
You know, we are losing canopy all over our urban areas at an astonishing rate. So the more trees we can put in the ground, the better off we're going to be. This is life for us. This is what makes our oxygen. So the more we can have, the more shade we can have, the better off our city's going to be.
Yeah, so get out there and plant some fruit trees.